we're going to talk about the infamous Theta II engine and how it relates to the Elantra N and the Kona N and the Veloster N. You know, is it actually the engine that's in the Elantra N? Would they put the Theta II that's known to have issues in a high-performance car? So we're going to talk about it. All right, guys, so let's get started with the history of the Theta II. When did Hyundai start making it? Let's get a little bit of the background. So the Theta II was originally introduced in the 2006 Hyundai Sonata as a naturally aspirated, multi-port fuel-injected four-cylinder engine. So the original version of the Theta II had CVVT, which is constant variable valve timing, and it was only on the intake camshaft. Then in 2009, Hyundai strapped a single scroll Mitsubishi turbo onto it, called it the Theta II Turbo, and stuck it in their new rear-wheel drive, fun, affordable performance car, the Hyundai Genesis. So one of the really interesting facts about the Theta II is that the engine is very closely related to the 4B11T found in the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 10. Well, Mitsubishi, Chrysler, and Hyundai had this global engine alliance going back in the day. So they all had versions of the same engine block. And, you know, they would adapt it to whatever vehicle they were putting it in. Some say that you can switch the pistons and the rods between the two. Most of the rotating assembly is different. And there are some other differences. The 4B11T is a semi-closed deck engine design, whereas the Theta II is an open deck. The basic architecture is shared, which is a pretty cool fact. So let's get into kind of the history of what makes the Theta II so bad. Like, what went down with the engine? Why is it so notorious? So after years of complaints of oil consumption and engine failure, Hyundai finally recalled 470,000 2011 and 2012 Hyundai Sonatas with the Theta II. During the manufacturing process, there were metal fragments that weren't completely cleaned out of the engines. So what would happen is, after so many thousands of miles, all those tiny little metal particles were being brought by the oil pressure into the oil passages, clogging them up, creating oil starvation, which in turn created knocking issues. It created premature wear of the bearings, and ultimately, in a lot of situations, complete engine failure. To date, Hyundai has recalled over 1 million Theta II powered Hyundai and Kia vehicles, which is crazy. But, you know, we can kind of chalk it up, I think, to most of it being the quality control of the manufacturing process versus the actual design of the engine. Fast forward to 2014, and Hyundai announced that they were pulling Albert Biermann, who was the head of the M division for BMW, over to Hyundai. So behind the scenes, they're developing the i30N, which of course we don't get in the US. Empowering that i30N was a new version of the Theta II that they named the Theta II-i. So essentially this was like version 2.1 of the Theta, the original Theta engine. So you might be asking yourself, why would they, with an engine so notorious for issues, why would they put that in this new performance car that they're developing, this whole new line of performance cars? And really what it comes down to is the Theta II-i is essentially a completely different engine than the Theta II. So while it shares the original architecture of the Theta II, essentially everything has been beefed up, improved, as well as the manufacturing process itself has been improved. As we all know, Hyundai has been in the touring car game and just absolutely killing it. They have 4 World Touring Cup championships, and through those years of racing, they've learned a lot, obviously, and they bring that racing technology to the Theta II-i. So now we're going to talk about the individual components that they upgraded. So let's start with the turbo. So basically they used a new turbo design and dialed out through the ECU as well, dialed out the turbo lag. So now the Theta II is known as a flat power engine. They added direct injection, so better fuel atomization, better response, better performance. They redesigned the pistons. They gave it a crowned profile, which is supposed to help with the air-fuel atomization. So another thing they added, which is usually only seen on very expensive high-performance cars, sodium-filled exhaust valves. They basically help increase the engine life from repeated track session. They went to a plastic polymer intake manifold, which not only helps with preventing heat soak, but also has intake runner plates that will open and close depending on engine RPM. So at lower engine speeds, the valves are partially closed, and that helps with, efficiency. And then when you're up in the higher RPM range or you're under full throttle, the plates completely open. That allows for maximum airflow under boost. They changed the CVVT. They switched it from hydraulically controlled to electronically controlled. And what that did is it gave it a quicker response time, as well as increased the range of the timing. On the coolant side of things, they included a pressurized coolant system versus just a regular overflow tank. And that's supposed to help with preventing overheating during repeated track sessions. Another really cool thing they added is an auxiliary coolant pump. And what that does is when you turn the car off after a long track session or, getting on the car, it circulates coolant through the turbo, preventing oil cake-up. They produce the Theta II in Korea versus at the U.S. engine plant. Whether that makes a difference, I don't know, but something tells me that quality control might be a little bit better. And while I couldn't find any specifics on what they did to change the block and the cylinder head design from the original Theta II, Hyundai has confirmed that they've improved and beefed up the block and the cylinder head. So take that for what it is. Again, I couldn't find specifics on the changes. So the Veloster N's been out since 2019, so we have 5 years of history with this engine. There are plenty of Veloster N's at this point that are getting up to 100,000 miles or exceeding 100,000 miles. And really, you'll find very few issues. The instances that I did find engine failure in the N performance cars were chalked up to 2 different situations. Both of them involve over revving the engine. The first is with a 6-speed manual, money shifting the car. That's user error. There's just nothing you can do about that. And if you're going to think you're going to third to downshift and you're really going to first, you're going to have an issue. That's going to be in any engine, any car. The other over revving issue was with early 2022 Elantra N and Kona N models with the wet dual clutch transmission. There was a software glitch with the transmission control module that was corrected under a recall, but there were unfortunately, some cars that went kaboom. There were very few Elantra N's and Kona N's that were part of that recall. It was a certain date range for the VIN. People that did have the recall done, I don't believe they've had problems once it was done. So that seemed to correct that issue. With all that said, I've had no reliability issues, and I really haven't heard of many people having it. Just make sure you're using the correct oil. I personally change it every 4,000 miles versus the Hyundai recommended. I believe it's like 7,500 miles. So I'm on like the severe maintenance schedule. I just feel a direct injection turbo engine should not go 7,500 miles, even if you're using full synthetic. So take that for what it is. That's my way of helping prevent any issues. Another really interesting thing about this engine is that it's putting out more horsepower than what Hyundai claims. That is if the engine is octane learned. If you want to check out my video on octane learning, I'll link it in the description up here in the video. People are getting 276 horsepower to the wheels, not at the crank like Hyundai advertises. So that's a pretty impressive number. So you're actually making more around 300 horsepower at the crank, maybe a little bit more. So in conclusion, do they actually have a Theta II? Technically, yes, but it's a much different version of the original Theta II that other than the block architecture itself, it's pretty much a completely different engine. As always, if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Until the next video, guys, peace out.